And in Georgia, opening statement set to begin at any moment in the killer's daughter's murder trial for Christopher Wolfenbarger. He's standing trial for the 25-year cold case murder of his wife, who was the daughter of a convicted serial killer. Let's go into the courtroom. That is where the parties are talking about the victim's father. What part, if any, will he play in this trial? They're hashing it out right now. Let's go in and listen to these arguments outside the presence of the jury.
Anything else that, there was a motion in limine that was filed by the state, I think last night. And I need some help with it because I wasn't quite sure I understood what we're trying to limit. Obviously, we've understood for some time now that the fact that Carl Patton is a convicted murderer, right, was going to come into evidence in some manner, right, that was going to be an issue in this trial. So I'm not exactly sure what you're asking me to allow or to forbid. Can you help me, Mr. Fawcett?
So I guess it's laid out in the motion, just as of the past week or so, I think it kind of gives me some insight into what possibly could be asked or attempted to elicit during the course of the trial. And as I've laid out, the only reason why Ms. Melissa Wolfenbarger's father is relevant for this case is because his arrest really jump-starts the identification of her. And I don't know when she would have been identified, but for the infamous arrest of her father and him saying, "Find my daughter," that's pretty much what we've heard repeatedly by the medical examiners, the lead detectives, and everyone involved. But to take that information and now to attempt to introduce letters from Carl Patton, what I'm trying to avoid is a relitigation of the case involving the Flint River Killer, because all the particulars of that case simply aren't going to be relevant for the determination of whether or not Christopher Wolfenbarger murdered his wife. So it's one thing to say, well, he was arrested. It maybe is relevant what he was arrested for. Maybe. But outside of that fact, and the fact that that arrest triggered the identification, that's what the detective, Bruce Jordan, was the notifier to the medical examiner's office of that missing woman, Melissa Wolfenbarger. That triggered the retrieval of the dental records from William Brantley. And that was the comparison that made the identification. So outside of that, what other relevant parts of the case would be admissible? I don't believe that the statements of Carl Patton would be admissible. I don't believe that the particulars of the case itself would be admissible. So I don't believe that the defense should be able to ask Norma Patton, well, tell me how many people did he kill? Tell me the circumstances of that. How is that relevant for whether or not Christopher Wolfenbarger killed Melissa Wolfenbarger? It just is not. And I think that in particular is something that confused the issues in this case that confused the jury.
Okay. Mr. McDermott?
We disagree, Your Honor. We think that the only point of relevance being that he helped them identify who she was is just the tip of the iceberg. There's an entire developed body of case law which has been even more developed recently by the Supreme Court regarding evidence of third-party guilt. This is a classic whodunit case. The state has only circumstantial evidence that Christopher led to the death of Melissa. We have substantial evidence that there could have been other people who were involved in her death. And the Supreme Court has recently said the standard for third-party guilt is basically going to be 401, 402, 403. And they have telegraphed that in their most recent opinions. Even though it's not the precedent, I'll grant you, they've telegraphed that. They've said the test is going to be, if this evidence makes it likely, tends to make it likely, using the I got on top of my head the rule for relevance, more or less likely that he's guilty,
right? Yeah.
Then it's relevant. And then it's only a 403 test after that. Well, Carl Patton's murders, it's not just he killed 5 people back in the 70s and that was it. It's why he killed people. It's his motives for killing people. It's who he killed, his friends and family. the way he killed them, wrapping them up in bags and dumping them in the river. It's the fact that he drove miles and miles to try to hide bodies. It's the fact that Norma Patton, who's going to be testifying here today, was right there hands-on helping him for 2 of those murders. She helped him, and what I intend to ask her about is only what she testified to in court. It's a certified court record that she helped. She helped plan the murders. She helped watch. She was in her living room. They shot the people. They fell. She helped clean up the blood. She helped carry the bodies out.
So let me stop you for a second and set what I think are going to be 2 signposts here before we get more granular, right? One is that Mr. Patton exists, that he is a convicted murderer, that he, I think, was briefly considered a suspect, although my understanding is obviously the state changed its mind and decided that it wasn't Mr. Patton. But all of those things are relevant, and I don't think that, I think that the state can't limit the relevance of Mr. Patton's existence and his history, right? Like how it's relevant to Melissa Wolfenbarger as a general proposition. Also, certainly, I fully expect that if Ms. Patton, Norma Patton, takes the stand, that there will be a thorough and sifting cross-examination about her involvement as a credibility matter, right? And as a convicted felon or whatever, you know, charges she pled to. All of those things I think are absolutely going to probably come into evidence. As a general proposition. What I'm concerned about is that part you were just talking about in terms of satisfying 403 from a basic relevance perspective, and to avoid getting too far afield of the issues in the case is my general feel is I don't really want to get into relitigating the circumstances of the murders that Mr. Patton committed unless you can show me the specific reason that they would be relevant to this issue. And right now we're just having a general argument and you're just making a proffer, but that's what I haven't heard.
Well, I would reiterate the points that I just did. They're certainly relevant to how these bodies were disposed. They're relevant to who was killed and potentially why they were killed. There's evidence that Melissa knew about Carl Patton's murders, which is something he kept under tight.
But again, that's the fact of the murders, you're talking about the circumstances.
It's a motive for the murders, and it would be a motive for this murder as well. That's evidence of third-party guilt. It's relevant.
Mr. McDermott, I think we're talking past each other.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm not saying that you're right now, as a baseline guidepost general proposition here, I'm not saying that I expect the defense is not going to talk about the fact that Carl Patton is a convicted murderer. And I'm not saying that you're not going to cross-examine Ms. Patton about her involvement and that sort of thing. I'm also not saying that the fact that he's a convicted murderer might have some relevance to this case and whether whether Melissa had motive or whether that might have formed some motive for Mr. Patton to be this alternate theory of the crime murderer, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I understand Mr. Fawcett's argument to be, it sounds like you want to go in and let's have a little mini trial about the circumstances of each of those murders. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. Why would anything other than the fact that he committed murder, right? Even the numbers, even the names, but why would the individual circumstances of those offenses, other than potentially some leeway to cross-examine Ms. Patton, Norma Patton, why would that be relevant?
Well, can the court help me out here? Mm-hmm. When you say, oh, I lost my point, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
In the last thing you said, obviously we would agree that the fact that he committed murder is irrelevant. But you're saying what more than that is relevant? You're asking me what beyond that would be relevant in this case. And I think anything that okay, let me go back to the point. You're saying we don't want to relitigate this case. And you hear me trying to relitigate the Flint River.
Yes.
What part about me reciting the facts that are on court records in a guilty plea hearing, what part of that is relitigation? These are just facts about how those murders happened, what their motives were, who they killed. Those are facts on record, testified to under oath. There's no litigation happening. But those are facts on record that are relevant to the facts that'll come out in this case. And that is directly relevant to third-party guilt.
Okay. So, Mr. Fawcett, as I understand the state's motion, it was an effort to limit the nature and scope of evidence that will come in about Mr. Patton. Is that a fair general characterization?
Absolutely, Judge, that's correct.
Okay. So,
And let me just say this, if I may.
sure.
I sometimes can miss things, but I don't know that we've received the transcripts that are being referred to by counsel.
Well, that's a different issue. Well, and when and if that arises, because I can't deal with all of these issues in a vacuum in the abstract, right? Some of these are going to have to come up in the moment, and that's fine. What I'm trying to do, which I think is the purpose of motions in limine, is to give the party some general guidance about what's okay and what's not. And I think that Mr. Carl Patton's existence history and affect, the fact that he was even briefly a suspect, the fact that Ms. Patton was allegedly involved in his murders or in cleanup, whatever, right? Those things are fair game, and I think that that to the extent the defense, I think those things are going to be facially relevant and not overly prejudicial. What I am concerned about, though, is confusion of the issues and prejudice that might arise if we go too far into the granular details, absent a clear showing of specific relevance of those details into the details of the killings committed by Carl Patton. And so that's my general guidance to you, understanding that as we start asking questions and get into the back and forth of actual witness presentation, you may satisfy me that it's necessary for you to go into the particulars of one or more of the particular killings by Mr. Patton. But right now, in a vacuum, absent a particular showing, a more particularized showing of relevance, I'm saying stay up here at the 50,000-foot level, and let's not get down into the weeds unless and until there's a showing that it's relevant for your purposes in this case.
So just to be clear, what I've already mentioned about the motives, at least in two of those killings, to keep people silent who are going to talk about his murders, is that 50,000-foot level, or is that down in granular level, or where are we talking about? Because the general motive for killing somebody seems to me would be directly relevant to this case.
So I think you're asking me to conduct a sort of quasi 404B analysis, right? In terms of, I understand Mr. Carl Patton doesn't have any 404B rights in this trial, but
also that's been specifically talked about in the case law.
I understand.
404 does not enter into the analysis at all.
I understand. I guess my point here is I've given you, I think, what are the general broad strokes. And so beyond that, I think you need to conduct your examinations of your witnesses in the way that you believe is necessary, and I will deal with individual objections as they arise. Again, my point is Mr. Patton's crimes, that they happened, that he was convicted for them, that Ms. Patton was involved in them, I think those are all, we're all expecting those are going to be relevant and discussed in this trial. I'm just trying to avoid getting down into the nitty-gritty of it unless it's relevant and necessary for you. And if that's the showing that you're going to try and make, then I may agree with you. I'm just not going to do it right now.
Okay.
Okay? Anything else that we need to take up pre-trial?
Okay, the judge talking it through with the attorneys. How is Carl Patton going to come in? Remember, Carl Patton is the dad of the victim in this case. He's a serial killer. He's going to come up during this trial. To what extent will have to be dealt with by Judge Krause as it happens. He's the guy that's accused of the murder. He's the husband.